Hello, I'm back. All right, I told you if I got a second wind that I would come back, and here I am. Sometimes you just need... Sorry about my bed, guys. Like, my bed is always in a state of disarray. Like, even if I took a nap, okay? Okay, sometimes you just need a nap, and you need to drink some water, have a sandwich, take a rest, okay? Especially now that the light is changing in most parts of the world. Most parts of the world, at least in the Western Hemisphere. Please remember to try to get as much sunlight as you can. I actually have my sun lamp beaming on me right now. If your hours are such that you're inside a lot and you don't get enough sunlight, please consider getting either like a light bulb that is bright enough that you can just sit in it for a little while. Because let me tell you, I have been so sleepy the past week, and then it just dawned on me, okay, we've had a significant light change in the past few weeks, and this usually happens to me every fall, every autumn. I start to kind of like become sleepy all the time. So, all right, if that made any sense, who knows? I'm half out of my mind, it seems. All right, let's continue. So I'm trying to think of what I said. Honestly, listen. So I look after my granddad, guys, and I was so tired today. I took him to his doctor's appointment and then back to his place, and we played bingo with the other people in his facility. And I never played bingo before, but I've always wanted to play bingo, so that was really fun. The only thing that was a little disappointing for me is that the person calling the numbers wasn't someone who was doing like all the rhyming things. Like, I can't even think of an example, but you know, I know sometimes they're like 2 fat ladies, 88 and stuff like that. And I thought that would just be the most fun, but oh well, I played bingo. I played 3 games, and then I was like, all right, I think this is enough for me. And I looked over at my granddad, and he was kind of looking at me like this. And I'm like, are you ready to go? And he's like, yeah, I think I've handled enough excitement. And I said, well, that was fun, Pop. And he was like, oh yeah, almost couldn't handle how much fun it was. I'm like, well, it was fun for me because I've never played bingo before. Okay, where was I? I don't even know. The rabbit escaped his pen, and the kids were like, Mom! Help! What a little bugger he is. Okay. Anyway, he just can't, if anyone's awake, he can't handle being in the pen. He has to find a way out of it. But as long as everyone's in bed and the lights are turned off, he's fine. But he has to be right in the middle of the action. Okay. Let's just get through as much of this as we can, and then I have to hang up some clothes. Okay, this chapter is entitled Running Out of Road. When I flew out to Michigan in the late autumn of 2017 to see Rhea again, I showed up in a different role and in a far more humble state of mind. I was no longer there to be the most important person in Rhea's life, or to be the one who was living out her most beautiful story with her wild ride-or-die partner, or the one who had all the plans for how things needed to go. All that was over. Instead, I showed up as the invited house guest of Stacy, who, with incredible kindness, competency, and generosity, was helping our friend Rhea to die. And indeed Rhea was dying. This was a truth that could no longer be ignored. Of course, we had all known that Rhea was dying for well over a year now, but knowing that someone is dying is not the same thing as understanding that someone is dying. That is the truth, let me tell you. When someone that you love is passing, there is a big disconnect. And I think it is a way that your mind protects itself. Because, you know, you have to keep going during all of that. You can't just lay down and life goes on. And so there's like this disconnect where it's like, that they're dying, but somehow it doesn't quite connect. And I know for me, like with my aunt, it's like I really struggled to understand the reality. Like I knew, but it hadn't connected yet to my heart. Now the reality had become too brutally evident to ignore. Rhea had lost an enormous amount of weight since last I'd seen her. Partially this was due to the drug binge and the subsequent trauma of her final detox. But it was also because the tumors, which were now clearly visible when you looked at her torso, were consuming all the nutrients she ate in order to support their own dark and ambitious agenda. I remembered us at the beach only 2 years earlier in Miami, when she was all roundish and brownish. I always loved the way Araya looked in a bikini, and I loved that she always wore a bikini no matter her age or weight. I always loved her softness, the folds of her belly, her dense, powerful, reassuring physical presence. Now she had become frail, and her skin had taken on a bluish-yellow tinge. The Rolex I'd given to her more than a year earlier was enormous on her thin wrist, and it hurt her to wear it because it kept banging against the bones of her hand and arm, but she wouldn't take it off. Her shoulder blades really were like blades. Each vertebra of her spine was its own distinct island. Her hand shook all the time, and there were dark raised veins all across her body, veins that made her skin look like a road map, as her overburdened circulatory system struggled to find new pathways for her blood. She was having trouble eating real food now and was volunteering to drink in shore, which she had been enraged to be offered by me 6 months earlier. She was walking with a cane and asking people for help. Still, she was gorgeous. It was that face. Nothing could ever change or ravage it. Not drugs, not madness, not cancer. Rhea had always been beautiful, but now she was luminous. Newborns have that look too, and sometimes the very elderly and the dying. It is the look of someone who has recently arrived here, or who is soon to go home. The light of another world shining through. Well, I find that very romanticized because I've not seen that. Death is ugly no matter what. When my grandmother passed, my dad, because my dad's a minister, he gave such a very touching sermon. Because there's a scripture that says that the death of the saints is beautiful in the eyes of God. And he talked about how death isn't pretty, but it's beautiful. Something can be ugly to look at, but still be beautiful. Do you know what I mean? Like, think of, think of even a grandparent that to a stranger, in their old withered years, is not exactly beautiful. They're not pretty, I should say. They're not, it's not an attractive thing, but it's to you, they're beautiful. You know what I mean? Oh, well. In the last weeks of Rhea's life, she seemed to have silvery moonlight streaming from her eyes, and I could not bring myself to look away. Her physical pain was being controlled by a dose of methadone every 5 hours, which Stacy administered and which really seemed to be working, and she was taking no other drugs after all that. So close to death, she seemed sort of okay. Only 6 months earlier, she'd been literally rolling on the floor in pain, sobbing and howling in anguish, and needing to ingest opioids by the handful in order to fight back the agony. But now she seemed comfortable and strangely peaceful. Was this the result of her own spiritual surrender, a giving up, a giving into? I don't know. I will never know. But she barely needed any painkillers at the end. We were awkward with each other at first, as uncertain as strangers, because how do you do this? How do you reconnect with someone after so much pain and rage, and with the reality of death so near? Stacy helped us out as much as she could, translating Rhea to me and me to Rhea in a kind and immaterial fashion. Rhea has a very young mind right now, she had explained to me on the phone in the days leading up to my arrival, and I need to warn you that she's really reduced. She's lucid again, and all her anger is gone. But you're going to see a big decline in her from even a few weeks ago. She's not what she was. I think it really took the life out of her to ride the dragon one last time. She doesn't remember much that happened over the last few months, and she's confused about where you went and what happened to your relationship. But she loves you and misses you, and she's sorry for how she acted, as much of it as she remembers anyway. I don't know what Stacy told Rhea about me, but I'm sure it was just as generous and humane. I could see that Rhea was trying to perform for me at first, trying to demonstrate that she really was clean and sober and sane. She asked me polite questions about my trip and told me that I looked very nice. I had brought her a New York Giants sweatshirt, her second favorite team after the Lions, and she thanked me for the gift in an uncharacteristically formal manner, like she was a kid who'd been trained to be gracious to a visiting auntie. It was so disorienting for me to see Rhea Elias, always so proud and wild and powerful, being cautious with me of all people, and I wanted it to stop. You don't have to audition for my affection, I told her. You don't have to prove anything to me or earn me back. My heart already knows who it belongs to. This seemed to relieve her a bit, but I could still see the doubt in her eyes. Was that really true? I myself didn't really know, was it? Who even were we anymore? That first night, when we were alone together at last in the same bed, Stacy's guest bed, which she had made up beautifully for us and had surrounded with candles and flowers, I had to learn how to hold Rhea's body in new and more careful ways so as not to hurt her. She had more bruises and sore spots and less mobility. Our uncertain physicality with each other seemed to be the bodily representation of our uncertain emotionality with each other. She was fragile, a word I would never before have associated with Rhea. Alone with me in the dark, cautiously, slowly, she began to speak. She told me that she had been having dreams of her parents lately, both of whom were long dead. Almost every night since coming to Stacy's house, she said, either her mother or her father would come to visit her in her sleep. She found these visitations upsetting, she confessed. It was beautiful to see her parents again, but she knew they were drawing near in order to help escort her out of life. And that broke her heart and filled her with fear, because she was frightened of dying. I don't want to go, baby, she admitted. I'm not ready to die. It was the first time she'd ever said those words. She went on, I don't know how to die. And it's been kind of freaking me out that you haven't been jumping in to solve things. I don't understand why you don't have a plan for me, because you always have a plan for me. It scares me a little bit that you aren't trying to organize all this anymore. I'm feeling it in my heart as a condemnation. Sorry, I've got a fuzzy on my nose. I always have a fuzzy on my nose in these, it seems. Okay. I said, sweetheart, you kept telling me that I was controlling your life, so I had to step back and let you find your way. Isn't that what you wanted? You get to decide what you need now. I'll help you as much as I can, but you get to make the plans now. But what if I don't know what to do? She asked. Maybe I don't know what to do either. She took that in, and we were quiet for a while. After a long silence, she said she had been dreaming of her grandmother a lot too. Her grandmother, her Tay-Tay, was coming to her in dreams and speaking in Aramaic, which Rhea could barely understand. She saw other relatives in dreams too, including ancestors she knew only from photographs. It's almost like there's a gathering happening on the other side, she said. It's like they all know I'm dying, so they're coming for me. Or maybe I'm getting closer to them. It's hard to know. She told me that she'd had a dream the other night in which she was trying to explain to her mother that she needed everyone to be super effing calm around her from now on because dying was so difficult and scary. And then her mother asked, but are you yourself calm, Habibi? We both laughed at that, a little corrective mothering from the beyond. What was your mom wearing? I asked, knowing that Georgette Elias had always been famous for her style. Brown suede culottes and a V-neck sweater and a lacy ruffled shirt underneath. Rhea said. Her classic red Chanel lipstick, her hair just right. In another dream, she told me she was visiting her father in the hospital room where he had died from pneumonia many years earlier. Nobody else would talk to him, Rhea said, because they all thought he was already dead. But he winked at her in his friendly and conspiratorial old way and said, "Come over here, Binti." Binti is the Arabic term for my daughter, and it's what Rhea's father had always called her with dearest affection. In the dream, he took her hand and told her, Don't ever let anyone convince you that you're a bad person." She replied to him, "But Daddy, look at all the bad things I did." He said, "So, you think other people haven't done bad things? Never let anyone shame you, Binti. You are extraordinary." Then Rhea started crying and said to me, "Baby, I effed everything up so bad with us. I don't even know what happened. We had such a small amount of time to be together, and I wasted it away. Everything was so beautiful between us, and I had everything I'd ever wanted, and then suddenly it was gone. I don't even know why I did it. I guess I just had to wad everything up and throw it in the trash one more time. And then one day I woke up here in Detroit, and I didn't even know why I was here or where you went. But I know I was bad. I'm so, so sorry." "It's okay, my love," I said. "It's over. We got through it. We're here now." She sighed, curled tighter into my arms. "But why would I do that, though?" she asked. "Why would I be such an asshole like that? Why would anybody choose drugs when they could have this?" "I don't know, man. You tell me," I said. "Maybe it's because you're a big dummy?" "I'm such a big dummy," she said, laughing through her tears. "God, I'm the effing worst." "You might not be the worst. At least you didn't try to murder me. Did I mention that I tried to murder you?" "You tried to murder me?" She laughed again and coughed. "Are you serious?" "Totally serious. Back in the summer, you were so out of control that I couldn't stand it for another day, so I decided to kill you." "Dude, no way. That's badass. How were you going to do it?" "I was planning to dose you with a ton of sleeping pills and morphine and then cover your whole body with fentanyl patches." "JC, baby." "Are you mad at me?" "No way, dude. That's effing awesome. That's amazing. I'm so proud of you." Let me tell you, if my partner told me that he was planning on murdering me because I was so crazy, I'd be like, slowly reaches for the door. Now we were both laughing. "Wait, why are you proud of me?" "Because you found your darkness, dude. Remember the first day I met you and all I could see was all that light pouring out of you? It didn't make any sense to me. You were so bright and shiny. I remember thinking, this chick's got to have a ton of darkness hidden somewhere deep down inside her if she has all that light, like real darkness, like to balance all that sunshine, you know what I mean? Because nobody is just one thing. I always wondered where you hid all your darkness, babe. I'm so proud of you that you discovered it." "Well, you really bring it forth in me. Rock on," Rhea said, and she gave me a fist to bump very gingerly. We were quiet for a while after that, and then I said, "Babe, I don't want to make this into a big production if you don't want to talk about it, but Stacy said you were confused about where I went and what happened over the summer. All I remember is that your love was there, and then suddenly it wasn't. Do you really want to know what happened?" "Of course I do." "I don't want to shame you, but it got pretty bad, and there might be some things I need to get off my chest, things that it wouldn't be right for us to ignore. You hurt me very badly, Rhea. We might need to talk about it." Rhea reached over and turned on the light, then gingerly rolled over onto her side so we were facing each other. "Tell me," she said. "Tell me everything I did." There she was. There was my Rhea back again. Of all the versions of Rhea Elias who ever existed, and I feel like I knew them all, this was the version who was the most beautiful to me. The Rhea who could look someone in the eye and say without any defenses, "Tell me everything I did," and really mean it. The one who could take a broadside hit without flinching. The one who always wanted to know the deepest and gnarliest truth, even if it was about her. God, she was brave. So I told her. I told her about how abusive and degrading she had become, how she'd lied to me, how she'd taken money from me to buy drugs and put me at risk by keeping huge amounts of cocaine in the house and the car, how she'd pushed me away and insulted me whenever I tried to challenge her on any of this, how she'd used her cancer as a tool of manipulation and control, how she told other people I had abandoned her because I couldn't handle her cancer. Worst of all, how she told me that she wished we had never gotten together in the first place because my emotional bullshit was too much to deal with. She listened to all of it, and when I was done, she just nodded and said, "Yeah, that tracks." I saw no guilt in her eyes at that moment, just acceptance. She said, "That's what I'm like when I'm a drug addict, Liz. That's who I become. I bet it was a real shit show." "I'm afraid it was," I said. She went on, "If we had time, babe, if we had more years to be together, we would have a lot of work to do around this to make it right. I'd have to get back in the rooms and start all over at step one. I'd have to get a sponsor, start counting days, the whole deal. We'd have to go to therapy, talk it out, find ways to repair whatever got broken. We'd have to start from the beginning with each other. It would be a big process to earn back trust, but I know we could do it. I wouldn't even care what we ended up being in each other's lives going forward, friends, lovers, whatever. I wouldn't even care what the label is. I just love you, and I know we could make it right and find a way to keep loving each other. But baby, here's the reality. We don't have that time. We're running out of road here. So I have to ask you from the bottom of my heart, will you just forgive me? What else was going to save us that night but forgiveness? And maybe forgiveness isn't even the right word here, because it implies a hierarchy of morality, a patronizing, a bestowing, as if I, who once plotted to murder Rhea, would have the right to bestow forgiveness upon her or anyone. Good, bad, right, wrong. Do we even have time for this kind of language, any of us? I mean, aren't we all running out of road here? That's what I was thinking when Rhea asked me for forgiveness. But that's a lot to explain to someone who is starting to look very weary. So I just said, of course I forgive you. Will you forgive me? Of course. Then we fell asleep with the light still on, holding hands like children. The next chapter is called The Gathering. Rhea had said that a gathering was happening on the other side of the veil, as her departed ancestors came forward to receive her. But there was a gathering happening on our side of the veil as well, in Michigan, at Stacy's house, which had now become the epicenter of Rhea's diminishing world. Here, the living were gathering from all over this world to say goodbye to someone whom none of us were ready to lose. Distant cousins came to pay their respects to Rhea in the short time she had left. Rhea's siblings and their adult children circled around her, eager to create as many memories as they could while they could. Old Detroit friends from back in the day came to be with her, to reminisce and to fill the hours with laughter about antics from years ago. A Syrian priest, a refugee, came to deliver final prayers and sacraments, prayers of conclusion, prayers of absolution, prayers of safe deliverance. I still find it poignant that Rhea returned to Michigan to die rather than staying in New York City. When she was a teenager, all she'd ever wanted was to get away from this place, where nothing about her fit. But getting away hadn't been easy. She'd been the first person in her family to leave the family, and there had been a huge pushback from her relatives about it, especially the men. But Rhea had been happy to live in a total dive on the Lower East Side if it meant she could be free, if it meant she could be queer, if it meant that she could be an artist, if it meant that she could get high with her tattooed and mohawked friends and perform all night at CBGB and the Pyramid Club, where she and her fellow band members used to make fun of Madonna, another Michigan exile, for being a little effing brat. New York City was the place where a person could be all the things she ever dreamed of being, and where everyone got a second, third, and 10th chances to reinvent themselves every time they burned themselves out. But still, Michigan was home. It was where Rhea's siblings lived, where her original community lived. She still loved these people and longed for their care and acceptance. Michigan was where her oldest friend, Anita, lived, who had seen her since adolescence through every wild incarnation of her existence. It was where Stacy lived, who could talk her off the ledge better than anyone. Michigan was where her sister cooked the same astonishing, fragrant, multi-course Syrian meals that her mother had once cooked. It was where Rhea could swing by the Arab emigre neighborhood of Dearborn on her way from the airport to pick up pistachio rosewater ice cream, jars of Aleppo cherries, and roasted chicken wrapped in pita bread that you ate over the kitchen counter as soon as you walked in the door, not even bothering to take off your coat before you dug into that perfect, tender, falling off the bone meat. Michigan was where she could laugh and swear and smoke with her family, speaking in the French, Arabic, English patois that only they understood, telling stories about people whom only they knew. And now all these people were gathering around Rhea as she prepared to leave us behind forever. There were some really big personalities in the room, and I would love to say that we were all supportive and gracious with each other as we as we faced our own suffering and each other's, but I can only report that sometimes we were supportive and gracious, and sometimes we were not. Sometimes grief can look like rage, as it turns out. Sometimes grief can look like territorialism, jealousy, and blame. In the years since Rhea died, I have been asked many times to speak about death and dying, as if I might be some sort of enlightened expert on the matter, as if I could offer guidance as to how to face the death of a loved one with unperturbed peace and dignity. Honestly, I wouldn't know. People also talk a lot these days about the practice of conscious dying, to which I can only say, must be nice. I was, at best, only semi-conscious in the last weeks of Rhea's life. Like the rest of us in her fading orbit, I fluctuated between courage and generosity one moment and hopeless meltdowns the next. Sometimes I was a straight-up asshole, flexing the power of my intimacy with Rhea as I tussled with her family members, more than I had ever tussled with anyone before and more than I have tussled with anyone since. We disagreed about everything, it seemed, from how the original medical treatment should have gone, to who got to be at Rhea's side for various important events and procedures, to what should happen to her remains, to what kind of funeral service should be held and who should pay for it. There was even a deep philosophical and cultural divide about whether death was a topic that should be openly discussed or stoically ignored. These fights seemed terribly important at the time, but in the end, none of it mattered. It didn't matter because Rhea died anyhow. She died exactly how she decided to die, and along the way she pissed off pretty much everyone she loved at one point or another, and we were all doomed to be gutted when she was gone, no matter how strong or prepared or right we thought we were, and no matter how hard we tried to hold on to control. But there was nothing, absolutely nothing, that any of us could have done to change the shape of that journey. I understand all this now, but I didn't understand it then. As Rhea's sister Maha so graciously put it when I visited her in Michigan recently to make amends for some of the jackass ways I'd behaved around the time of Rhea's death, "It's okay, Habibi, we were all drowning, none of us knew what to do." As for Rhea in those final weeks of her life, she was at times noble and brave, at other times self-centered and manipulative, just like the rest of us. Sometimes she talked about her impending death with clear-eyed courage, but other times she was out of her mind with denial, like when she called a friend back in New York City just a week before she died, saying, "I'm just going to stay out here in Detroit for another month with the fam, and then I'll be back in town and we can make some music together. Then Liz and I are going to California for the summer. You should come with us, man." That same week, she asked me to make an appointment for her to get Botox back in New York in the spring. I humored her and pretended to secure the appointment because why argue? Why did it matter at this point? She also announced that she wanted an Apple Watch because her phone didn't work anymore, when it was, in fact, her fingers and eyes and brain that weren't working anymore. I got her the watch, but then she complained that it didn't work either. At that point, she was so nearly blind with end-of-life confusion that her mind could make no sense of the device's tiny, complex features. She asked to be taken back to the Apple store in person to trade in the defective watch for another brand new watch. So Stacy and I agreed to take her to the mall for this futile endeavor. Why did we do this? Because the alternative was to sit at home all day long waiting for Rhea to die, and none of us wanted to do that. Rhea insisted on being the one to drive us to the mall, and heaven forgive us, we allowed her to do it, with me and Stacy both grabbing at the wheel from either the passenger seat or the back seat, telling her when to brake and shouting at her to veer out of the way of oncoming trucks. It was so stupid and risky of us to have allowed this, but we had to. It would be the last day she ever drove a car, she who had always loved to drive. It was around this time that I began to understand at a much deeper level what it means to die, how you really do lose everything. I began to feel in my own heart all the things Rhea would never do again. She would never drive a car again. She would never go to a restaurant again or cook a meal for herself again or be able to bathe or shower alone. She would never see another summer's day. She would never play the piano again. She would never get on an airplane again and head off into a new adventure. She would never make love again. She would never walk outside by herself again. She would never swim in the ocean again. She would never write another song. I was losing her, yes, but she was losing everything, everything, everything. What I remember most about our visit to the mall that day was the sweet, fey, green-haired young man who worked at the Apple store, who had eyelashes like a baby giraffe, and who asked if he could help us. Rhea had demanded to do the talking. "Let me do the talking," she had said to me and Stacy conspiratorially, as though she were running a heist. And so we stood back and watched as she shakily and semi-articulately tried to explain to the young man why her perfectly good, brand-new, one-day-old watch was completely defective. It would have been obvious to anyone at this point that this woman wasn't well, and she might have even been a little crazy, but the boy, and really he was just a boy, was infinitely patient with her, despite how swamped the store was with holiday customers. Melting into his kindness, Rhea told him that she had cancer, and she only had a few more days left probably before she died. Then she told him all about her life, her birth in Syria, her move to Detroit as a child, her years in New York in the scene, the music and the films she had made, all those years she had done hair and the cool people she had met, the jails and institutions she had been in, her time on the streets, her relapses and recoveries. As the boy bestowed upon her the gift of his unwavering attention, she kept talking. She told him that she had written a memoir about surviving drug addiction, and that she had died more times than she'd been born. She pointed to me and Stacy and explained that we were her two best friends, the greatest crew in the world, world and that we were helping her die. She told him that she had no regrets about anything she had ever done, that nobody should ever regret what they have done, that life is worth every bit of suffering and craziness it entails just to be here for the ride. Everything is so beautiful, she told him. You're beautiful too. I effing love your hair, dude. I wish I could style you. By the end of this monologue, the last time Rhea would ever tell her story to anyone, she and the boy were hugging, and he was openly weeping. He told her she had inspired him deeply, and he hoped she had a beautiful Christmas. And may God bless you, he said. God bless you too, baby, she said. Then Stacy and I let Rhea drive home, totally white-knuckling it, while she somehow managed not to kill us or anyone else. After that, we hid the car keys from her forever. Oh, all right. I'm not commenting a lot because, you know, if you've ever had a loved one die of cancer, then there's just a lot of stuff that you can relate to. And so I really have nothing to criticize right now. I'm guessing that most of my criticisms for this are going to be over, I think. So, you know, we'll find out. This next chapter is also very short, and it is called, What Day Is It Today? I thought she was going to die on Christmas night. It really felt like she was going to die on Christmas night. Rhea's ex-wife, Gigi, was driving toward Michigan from New York City in a blinding snowstorm, driving hard and fast, determined to arrive before Christmas was over in order to see Rhea one more time. And it felt like Rhea was waiting for her to say that last goodbye to one of her dearest beloveds. All that day, Rhea had been sprawled out on the couch, sleeping far more hours than she was awake. She would wake up for a few moments at a time, ask if Gigi had arrived yet, and then say, "This is so good, this couch. Is it okay if I just stay here?" and fall back to sleep. She was uncharacteristically soft and compliant. She took her medications without resistance. She said thank you again and again with such sweetness. She seemed to have no more demands, only love. "I love you all so much," she kept saying to anyone who came over, to anyone who called on the phone, to anyone who brought her a glass of water. "I love everyone," she kept saying. She reached for Stacy's arm as she walked by and said, "I know that I love you so much, but in the last few days, I feel like I just can't, show." "It's okay, honey," Stacy said. "I know. We all know." Then Rhea fell back to sleep again in a way that felt like she was well and truly finished. That's how it had felt all day, the drifting in and out of various layers of consciousness. Rhea seemed to be here, but not here, seeing and hearing things that the rest of us could not see or hear. It was like she was testing the waters of the other side and then returning to our mortal shores. Twice in the previous few days she had reported that she was seeing orbs, glowing purple orbs that seemed to startle her as they rolled out of the closet or rose from the floor. She also saw a white tiger come out of the bathroom, cross the living room floor, look at her carefully, then walk through a wall, vanishing into the night. On Christmas morning, I had been talking quietly on the phone to a friend when Rhea woke up suddenly and said, "Baby, I see a beam of light pouring out of your forehead." "Oh yeah, my love? That's cool." "Yeah, it's really cool. I love it when I see that. That's how I can always know you're telling the truth." Later that day, when I was dozing with her on the couch, she'd said, "I just had a vision of you telling this story to someone in the future." "Who am I telling it to?" I asked. "Somebody really lucky," she said, and she fell back to sleep. She'd wanted me to pray over her multiple times throughout the day and asked me to chant the prayers in Sanskrit that I had learned at the ashram in India. Her own prayers were becoming more beautiful, dreamy, but strong. "Dear God," she said on Christmas morning, "thank you for giving me this task, this work to be done. Thank you for giving me this partner, these friends, this family to help me in this difficult task, the work of dying. It is an honor. People think it's a burden, but it can be an honor. I have always loved taking charge and a challenge. It's where I belong. This is where I belong right now. I belong in the doorway of death. This is where you want me as I die. I am huddled in partnership with this work, with these women, and with you, God. I will ride this work to the end, God. Amen, God. Blessed be." One second, the cat won't stop yowling. Okay. She hadn't wanted to eat anything all day or to drink anything. I called my mother, who is a nurse and who has sat at the bedsides of many dying patients, and asked for guidance. My mother said, "Try not to encourage her to eat if she doesn't want to. When someone who is dying doesn't want to eat, it's because their body can't process it anymore. Forcing food into them only brings its own problems. Same with liquids. Don't force her to do anything." As if anyone could ever force Rhea to do anything. Gigi arrived only moments before midnight, and Rhea was radiant with joy when she saw her walking through the door. "You came, baby," she said. "You came." Of course I came, my love. Merry Christmas, my love. And they hugged and wept, and we all wept. After that, Rhea let me tuck her into bed, and I told her stories and sang her Christmas carols until she fell asleep. A few hours later, she woke me up to say, I can see the opening into the box of dreams, and then she fell back to sleep. At 4 a.m., I tried to wake her to give her another dose of painkillers, but I couldn't rouse her. This had never happened. This had never before happened. Just a trigger warning, guys. I think this is the death scene, so if you need to skip this, go ahead. I waited an hour and tried to wake her again, but it was impossible. And now I could see that a physiological change was coming over her body. Her hands and feet were blue and cold, her lips blue, her breathing ragged. It was time. I felt sure it was time. I went to the other bedrooms and woke Stacy and Gigi. I think it's time, I whispered. And they both rose immediately without a question or a sound and came to Rhea's room. As though we had rehearsed for this moment for 1,000 lifetimes, we prepared the room for her death. Stacy lit a candle, and Gigi put on some sacred chants very low. Then we all three crawled into bed with her, her ex-wife, her ex-girlfriend, and me, her last and final lover, and wrapped our warm bodies around her cold body. It was a freezing cold night, with wind and snow whipping at the window. We took turns telling her how much we loved her, how much she meant to us, how magnificent a human being she was, and how we would never be the same for having known her, how grand she was, how she had taught us to be brave and honest, how fiercely she had protected us, how grateful we were, how we would never stop saying her name. The clock ticked, time slowed. Outside, the light was changing. A gray dawn was coming, and with it more snow. Then we became quiet, because it felt like a change was happening in the room. A deepening silence, a deepening presence. That's when Rhea opened her eyes and said in her regular voice, "What are you guys doing?" Oh, guys, I got so emotional. I was like, oh, shocked. We quickly wiped the tears from our faces and tried to act perfectly normal. Nothing, I said. We're not doing anything. Babe, why are Stacy and Gigi in our bed? I don't know, I said. They aren't. They just came over to drop off some mail. What's that music? What's that smell? Are you guys effing burning candles in here? Absolutely not, I said. No candles. That's just Stacy's perfume. Stacy was now furiously blowing out the candles while Gigi scrambled to shut off the Gregorian chants. You guys are really weird, Rhea said, nonplussed. Then she sat up in bed, turned on the light, lit a cigarette, and sounding exactly like herself, said, "Hey, babe, what day is it today?" "It's December 26th, my love." "Cool," said Rhea. "I want to hit that 60% off sale at Lululemon." And so that, dear reader, is what we did. We helped Rhea rise up out of what we had been certain only moments before was her deathbed. Then we showered her, dressed her, gave her some breakfast, took her shopping at Lululemon, where she proceeded to spend an hour trying on athleisure wear for some future imagined life, I suppose, a life in which she was not dying, a life in which she would need a lightweight windbreaker and a new pair of leggings for all those long walks she was planning to take on the beach in the bright summer sunlight. A life in which the winter would end and the seasons would change and we would drive to the ocean and all our friends would be there and everyone would be joyful and everyone would be together and everything would be beautiful. Okay. Let's read this chapter. It's entitled Feeding Crackers to a Lion. I do not want this assignment, Rhea. I do not want to tell people the details of how you died. I could take the easy way out, of course, and just insert the text that Gigi sent to all our friends and family on that freezing cold Michigan afternoon, January 4, 2018. This is Gigi typing on Liz's phone. Liz has asked me to share the news with you that Rhea has passed away. Liz is in silence right now, but she has asked me to tell you. Rhea left this world at 4:13 this afternoon, surrounded by those who love her. Liz sends you all her love and gratitude. She will be in touch at some point more personally. Or I could just insert the official announcement I made on social media. She was my love, my heart, my best friend, my teacher, my rebel, my angel, my protector, my challenger, my partner, my muse, my wizard, my surprise, my gift, my comet, my liberator, my rock star, my impossible non-cooperator, my otherworldly visitor, my spiritual portal, and my baby. I loved you so much, Rhea. I would tell you to rest in peace, but I know that you always found peace boring. May you rest in excitement. I will always love you. But that would be a cheat because it wouldn't tell the truth about what actually happened. And you would want me to tell the truth about what actually happened. I wish I could tell the people that you died peacefully, Rhea. And my God, how we all tried to help you die peacefully. But the truth is that you died exactly the way you lived, defiantly, violently, bravely, furiously, self-destructively, uncooperatively, ridiculously, exhaustingly, proudly. You did it all backward from the way it's supposed to go. Instead of your body getting colder, you burned with fever. Instead of your heart slowing down, your pulse raced to nearly 200 beats a minute. Instead of relaxing, you became increasingly agitated with every hour. For 2 days, you were unconscious but not peaceful. You were choking and struggling. It sure looked to me like you were suffering, even as the hospice nurses kept filling you with painkillers and sedatives and telling me that you were beyond all sensation. You didn't look like you were beyond all sensation. I kept telling the nurses and the doctor, she's an opioid addict. Do you have any idea how many drugs this woman can consume without it having any effect on her? Giving her these tiny little doses of liquid morphine is like feeding crackers to a lion. Are you sure she's not in pain? They kept assuring me that you were not in pain, but honey, I know you, and I could see you were in pain. Oh, that is so hard. I know what that's like to know that your loved one is in pain, and someone's telling you, like, no, they're not in pain. No, they can't feel anything. It's hard. As you struggled, everyone you loved gathered around you trying to help. We kept whispering in your ear, let go, let go, let go. It's okay to let go. Because that's what the death experts always tell people to say when someone is dying. But I finally suggested to everyone that we stop saying that because I could tell it was pissing you off. Actually, I clearly heard you say in my head, why don't you bitches let go if it's so fucking great? So eventually we stopped bossing you around and put on David Bowie for you. And then we all went silent. I had a sense that the ancestors who had been gathering on the other side of the veil were asking you to let go as well. I imagined them saying, come to us, Rhea, let go and come to us. But I sensed they were pissing you off too. You simply refused to surrender, and I guess that was the beautiful part. It was beautiful because it was so you. It felt very punk rock, very Rhea Elias, very Harley Loco. It was like you were raising 2 middle fingers to the sky, even though you couldn't lift your arms anymore. It felt like you were saying to death, if you want me, mother effer, you're going to have to come for me. And so death came for you. Of course it did. What did you think, honey, that you could beat it just because you had beat it so many other times? Did you think that you could beat it forever? That you could talk your way out of it, fight your way out of it, hustle your way out of it, charm your way out of it? No. Death always gets the last word. Your battle was fierce, though, right down to the last truly horrifying moments. You didn't look like someone who was dying while surrounded by love and care. You looked like someone who was dying all alone. You refused to take comfort from any of us. You wouldn't relax no matter how much morphine we gave you or how many gentle words we spoke. You weren't about to release your soul into any goddamn ocean of peace. You weren't about to walk toward any goddamn white light. Not on anyone else's terms, anyhow. This was definitely not the gentle death I had planned for you. Me and my plans. When did my plans for you ever work out? It was truly awful to behold, yet you had never seemed more like yourself. I watched you die for 48 hours, Rhea. I did this because I had promised you I would be there to bear witness, right to the end. I did it because it was my destiny to watch you die, which you and I both knew to be true, and somehow it was okay because, horrible as your death was to behold, I knew in my heart that it could not have gone any other way. But a miracle happened right after you died. Instantly, as soon as you took your final ragged breath, your face settled into an expression of peace. Actually, it was more than simply peace. My baby, my love, you looked so satisfied. I might even say that you looked thrilled. We all saw it, and it made us gasp with amazement, those of us who had been sitting vigil for your final battle. I had never seen such relaxed joy on your face before, Rhea, not even in your moments of greatest ecstasy, creativity, or love. You looked absolutely delighted with yourself, delighted with everything, delighted forever, just so radiantly delighted. You looked proud and pleased and surprised and amused and knowing and so happy. You looked free beyond any freedom I have ever seen. My love, do you remember how I stayed with your body for hours after you took your last breath? Do you remember that part? Do you remember how you made me promise a few weeks earlier that I wouldn't leave your body alone after you died? I'm afraid of being left alone in a dark room as a corpse. You had told me, please stay with me. And so I stayed there in the bed with you, holding you and kissing you and telling you stories about the blue-eyed peoples and the brown-eyed peoples and all the incredible adventures they'd had together in Earth School. What a ride you took us on, Rhea, I told you, and I could hear your laughter. We washed your still warm body, these exhausted women who all loved you so much. We put clean clothes on you. Your sister and I joined hands and prayed over you. Somebody called the funeral home. I asked them to delay collecting your body for as long as legally possible so that we could have some more time together. Do you remember that part, Rhea? Did you see your own body as we took care of you? Did you see that expression of delight that never left your face? Did you see the look of joy just got richer? Did you hear how everyone who came into the room commented upon it? Even the hospice nurse, as she wrote out your death certificate, said, I hope this isn't an inappropriate thing to say, but I have never seen a happier face on a dead body. Gosh, whatever your friend saw in the last moment of her life, it must have been pretty amazing. Did you hear us talking about you, Rhea, or were you already gone? Were you still with us at that point, my love, or were you already with them? Oh, this was hard. This was hard to read. Whew. Okay. This is a poem, almost too fragile to be. I was too sensitive, they always said, too fearful, too weak, almost too fragile to be. But I saw things the others could not see. I once tried to build a cathedral in my bedroom, using only materials I found in my dad's garage. I was onto something there. I knew God was real, and I was trying to call it in. I once composed a hymn for a dead cat. Somebody had to. He was such an important cat. Sometimes at night, I could feel my spirit rising up from my form. I believe everyone could feel this. I later found out I was wrong. I dug a soft nest in the back of the most dangerous car ever manufactured in America and burrowed there safely for years. I found the one warm spot in the house, curled up in silence, and learned how to read. I trusted every stranger, ran straight into their arms. My instincts were accurate. No stranger ever did me harm. Bullies hurt me because they could. Monsters scared me because they should. But listen, you guys, I was good. They said I was too fragile to survive this world, but had they ever even met this world? Had they never seen the fingernail thinness of the robin's egg, or the origami fold of the hunting dog's leg, or the way that people in pain can be soothed only by other people who understand pain, such that the child who once cried on the playground because she was frightened of the swings grew into a woman who could hold her dying lover with so much strength and light, the way the air holds the monarchs on their final sacred flight, breathing quietly and right alongside every beat of those powerful, delicate wings. All right, we still haven't read for a full hour, and I said I was going to read a full hour, so let's keep going. This chapter is entitled 3 Stories About Rhea's Mother. Number 1. Rhea was diagnosed with cancer only a week after she turned 56 years old. She and I had rented a place together on the Jersey Shore for the weekend to celebrate her birthday, and we'd invited some friends and loved ones to join us there. It was mid-April, sunny but cold. Rhea and I went to the house the day before everyone else arrived so we could have some time together alone and set up things for the party. We spent that Friday night writing a song together and singing on the couch. Remember, at this point we were not lovers, just best friends. Just best friends who were always trying to find a way to have a few hours alone together. On Saturday morning, the day of her birthday, and several hours before any other guests arrived, Rhea came and knocked on my bedroom door to wake me up. She popped her head into my room and said in utter joy, "Baby, let's bake a birthday cake today. I dreamed about a strawberry birthday cake covered with whipped cream, and now I want to figure out how to do it. Let's go to the store." So we went to the store as soon as it was open and bought ingredients for a strawberry cake covered with whipped cream. Rhea had never baked a cake before, but she was like, "Hey, how hard can it be?" We returned to the beach house and put on happy music and danced around the kitchen, laughing and joking as we created the cake. It was funny because neither one of us had any idea what we were doing. Moreover, because the house was a rental, we had trouble finding the right kitchen tools for the job. But we did our best with it, and soon Rhea's first ever homemade cake was in the oven. We let the cake cool while we ate breakfast. Then we covered it with piles of whipped cream and strawberries. We stood back and admired our work with pride. Rhea announced that it looked exactly like the confection she had seen in her dream. The moment was perfect, and the whole house smelled like birthday. Then Rhea leaned into me and whispered in a tone of serious conspiracy, "Dude, let's just eat this effing cake right now." I started laughing. It was 10:30 in the morning and we had just had breakfast, but she was dead serious. "No, for real, dude, let's just eat the whole cake before everyone gets here. They'll never know. We can just make another one later." I couldn't stop laughing because this was so Rhea, so funny and over the top, but most of all because it was so addict-y. I laughed, and then suddenly I stopped laughing because I felt something come into the room, or rather, I felt someone come into the room. And before I even paused to choose my words or consider what I was about to say, I blurted out, "Rhea, your mother's here." I looked down and saw that I had goose flesh all over my arms, and I could feel an electric tingling on my shins and up to my scalp because she was. Georgette Kaiser Elias, the youngest of the 4 beautiful daughters of the Kaiser family of Aleppo, Syria, and widely considered to have been the most beautiful, a woman who was always the most elegant figure in any room she walked into. The loving and affectionate and long-suffering mother of Rhea, a woman who had died long before I ever met Rhea, back when Rhea was still a full-on junkie, was here. Georgette was right there in the kitchen of this Jersey Shore rental property with us, and there was no question that it was her. And now she was speaking words directly into my mind. When I tell you that nothing like this has ever happened to me before, please believe me. I lead a pretty rich spiritual life, sure, but I had never before been a channel for a ghost. Yet here was Rhea's mother unmistakably present, and she wanted me to tell Rhea something very important. Instantly, I found myself weeping, absolutely saturated with mother love, as I said to Rhea, "Your mom is here, and she wants me to tell you that she loves you so much. She's so proud of you, Habibi. She's full of joy to see your happiness. She's laughing with you and telling you to go ahead and eat the cake. She says eat the whole thing because who cares? She wants you to celebrate your life, and she wants to celebrate with you. She loves you. She loves your appetite. She loves your spirit. She loves you so much, and she is so proud of what you have made of your life." Then Rhea and I were both laughing and crying and hugging because we were so happy and so full of love, and because we both knew that Rhea's mother was right there with us. We ate the cake, of course, and it was wonderful. It was the best cake ever. And then just 1 week later, Rhea found out she was dying. All right, number 2. There was a night when Rhea was on chemo when she was so sick that she couldn't settle. Nights on chemo were always difficult, but this was one of the worst. She couldn't stop vomiting, sweating, crying. Nothing I could offer was helping, not the cold compresses I kept bringing, or the special drinks, or the medications, or the soothing stories. Finally, she just collapsed in my arms, weakening in frustration and pain. And as I held Rhea's trembling body, her mother came to visit us again. When Georgette entered our bedroom, I immediately knew that it was her, but the effect was quieter this time. I felt the same tingling in my scalp and goose flesh up my arms and legs, but her energy was hushed and tender. This was not a joyful situation after all, but a moment of dire suffering. "May I please kiss my daughter?" she asked me from inside my mind. "May I hold my daughter just for a moment?" "Of course," I silently responded to her. And then Georgette Kaiser Elias entered my body, such that it was no longer my arms holding feverish Rhea, it was her mother's arms. It was no longer me comforting Rhea, it was her mother. My soul left my body so Georgette could be alone with her girl. My being stood back in silent respect in the presence of such love. Then Georgette gave one kiss to her suffering child, just one kiss on the forehead through me, and was gone. That's when Rhea finally fell asleep. Okay, I don't know how I feel about any of that, guys. I'm just not going to comment. Okay, number 3. As I have mentioned, Rhea's mother started coming to her in dreams every night in the weeks before she died. "Take my hand, Habibi," Georgette would say, smiling at her beautiful wayward child. "I'm right here, just take my hand." Rhea would wake up from these dreams in tears because she loved her mother and longed for her love, but she didn't want to take her hand because she knew it would mean death, and she wasn't ready for that. She wasn't ready to die. But each night her mother reappeared, always bringing the same message: take my hand, take my hand, take my hand. On her last night of consciousness, Rhea woke up in tears one more time from the dream of her mother. She told me that this time she had, in fact, attempted to take her mother's hand, but had found that she didn't know how. In the dream, Rhea couldn't move her arms. She simply could not reach out, even though her mother was standing right there, and even though Rhea now longed to go to her. In the dream, Rhea had asked Georgette, "What do I have to do to get to where you are? Do I have to, fight my way there? Do I have to, punch my way through?" Her mother had smiled with infinite tenderness and said, "Habibi, where you are going, there is no more fighting. It's easy, my love. Just take my hand." But Rhea hadn't been able to do it. Shortly after Rhea reported this dream to me, she lost consciousness. 2 days later, she died. 2 weeks after Rhea's death, after the cremation and the memorial, after we had packed up all her things, after the gathering of grieving humans began to disperse, and right before I headed back to New York City to begin rebuilding my life, Stacy gave me the gift of a session with a psychic medium named Lori Lipton in Birmingham, Michigan. I had never before been to a medium, and I didn't know if I believed in mediums, but my general inclination in life is to try everything, and my specific thought of the week was, maybe this nice lady will help me. Lori did indeed turn out to be a nice lady, a sweet-faced, blonde, middle-aged suburban woman in clogs and comfortable dress, whose office was decorated with butterflies and dream catchers. For someone who talks to the dead, she was the furthest possible thing from flaky or occult. In fact, she had such a motherly kindness about her that I fell into her arms crying as soon as we met. And when I saw that there was a couch in her office, I asked if I could lie down and if she would put a blanket over me for our session and tuck me in. She laughed and said, "Of course I will, honey." As she snuggled the blankets around me, Lori said, "Oh my goodness, Rhea's already here in the room with us, and she's hilarious. She's making jokes and cracking me up. Oh my goodness, she's certainly very strong, isn't she? She's very commanding. She's amazing. Please forgive my language, but she's instructing me to shut the F up and let her do the talking because she has a bunch of really important shit to tell you. Oh my goodness, Rhea, you certainly do like to swear. Okay. First of all, she's telling you that you don't need to waste money on an effing psychic. Her words, not mine, because you guys can learn how to communicate with each other all by yourselves. That's hilarious. Nobody's ever said anything like that before. Oh, now she's saying, no offense, Lori. Oh my goodness, she certainly is funny and honest. It's no problem, Rhea. No offense taken. Okay, I'll tell her. Slow down, Rhea. I'll tell her. Then the nice lady told me that Rhea wanted me to know that she had suffered a horrible and painful and violent death. Okay. Now, this is a pretty wild thing to say to someone who is grieving the death of a loved one, isn't it? Yet I know it to be true. Rhea had suffered a horrible and painful and violent death, for I'd witnessed it, but there was no reason Lori would have known about it. Lori went on to say, Rhea wants you to know that the reason she had such a hard death was because she wouldn't let go. She didn't believe that there was anything on the other side. She was scared. She truly believed that death was the end. She was terrified of being erased, she said. I nodded. That tracks. But Rhea said there is something on the other side, and it's more beautiful than she could ever explain. She says the best way she can describe it is this. She has become music now. She says not to be afraid of death because it's beautiful, and when it's your time to die, she will be the one who comes and gets you. Tell her to come and get me right now, I said, bursting into tears again. She can't, honey, and she misses you too, said Lori, stroking my head, but it's not your time. Rhea is saying that you won't die for a long, long time because you still have work to do on Earth. She'll help you wherever she can, but you'll have to find your own way. She says she isn't worried about you, though, because you are much stronger than you think. She says you are every bit as strong as you believed she was, but you're the only one who doesn't realize that yet. She loves you so much, Liz, and she says that you gave her enough love to keep her heart full for the rest of its journey through the universe. She is deeply grateful. She says you were the biggest surprise of her life. She was amazed when you came to her and confessed your love. She had no idea. She was never sure if she was good enough for you, but she loved you so much. Tell her I love her too, and I always will. Lori laughed and said, Rhea says you damn well better love her. She also told me to tell you that she's watching you right now and she loves your tears. She loves your heart. But Rhea says the most important thing she wants you to know is this. She says that when she got to the border of death, the first thing she saw was her mother's face, just like in the dream, and her mother was smiling at her and saying, take my hand. All right, one more chapter. It's called Bow Down. If this were only a story about the life and death of Rhea Elias, I suppose our book would be finished now, and may God rest her soul. But it isn't only a story about Rhea, it's a story about the two of us, and we still have me to deal with here. Me, who didn't get to die in January of 2018 and cross the river into eternal peace. Me, who was left behind here in Earth School, feeling more alone and uncertain in my curriculum than ever. Me, who was, at the time of Rhea's death, still an unrecovered sex and love addict on the loose, still living in the same trauma-informed brain I've always possessed, a brain that would chew itself to death if it were left unsupervised and distracted for too long, a brain that had always instructed me to grasp onto others for comfort whenever it was in need and in pain, a brain that was hardwired to seek solace outside of itself, wherever solace could be found. A brain that was now permeated with the deepest grief of its life and therefore hungrier than ever for sedation, stimulation, connection, and relief. A brain that, in the aftermath of Rhea's departure, now felt like an uninsulated high-voltage wire crackling and snapping and whipping about in the winds of a never-ending storm. How did it go for me then, after Rhea died? What did I do next? How do you think it went for me? What do you think I did next? I did what I had always done. I did what any sick and suffering addict will always eventually do if they don't have a program of recovery. I went out there and I used. So, let me break it down for you, as Rhea used to say. Attentive readers may remember that I had started attending 12-step meetings when Rhea was on cocaine and my world was falling down around my ears. You may also remember that I'd hated every minute of those meetings, although I did take some notes. You may not be surprised to learn then that I had stopped attending those meetings as soon as I could, which in my case meant as soon as Rhea stopped using cocaine and started being nice to me again. Because all my problems were solved after that, right? I mean, why should I have to attend a recovery program designed to support people whose lives were affected by the addictions of others if my other wasn't acting out in her addiction anymore? And why should I have to attend meetings for sex and love addiction when I was actually getting love again from someone I was devoted to? Anyhow, I'm way smarter than most people, and I had quickly breezed through all the literature. So I figured that I basically understood all the principles of these programs and had learned all I needed to learn, obviously. So I had walked out of the rooms of recovery in late October of 2017 like, thanks for all the information, everyone. I'm all set now. Nice meeting you. I'll take it from here. Except that I wasn't all set, because I have never been all set. I was, in fact, a mess, and not only because Rhea had died, but also because at some level I had always been a mess. Not that you would have known it by looking at me in the months after Rhea's death, but that's because there are two things I know how to do really well in life. One is act like everything is fine. The other is to work my ass off. And so, once Rhea died, I got back to the business of acting like everything was fine and working my ass off. I don't really have time to grieve, I remember saying to a colleague. I just need to put my life back together again. There was, in fact, some truth to this. I really did need to put my life back together again because I had not been tending to myself at all in the 20 months since Rhea had been diagnosed with cancer. Now I needed to pick up the pieces of my own existence, whatever remained of it, and glue back together something resembling a life of my own. One of the first things I did after Rhea died was to call Miriam, I can't pronounce her last name, Miriam, my lecture agent, and ask her to book me a whole bunch of public speaking engagements because I urgently needed to make some money. My bank account had been gutted by the dual expenses of divorce and death, and I wanted to start earning again, and fast. Are you really sure you're ready to do that? Miriam asked. Totally sure, I said. I'll take any job you can get for me. So Miriam hustled and found me a bunch of bookings, and I hit the road. My first public speaking event was a scant 2.5 weeks after Rhea died, which now seems insane to me, but I remember being quite proud of myself for getting up there on stage in front of a bunch of strangers and performing as a bright, shiny public figure. I remember thinking, look at how well I'm doing. Look how strong and resilient I am. I also returned to writing the novel that I had abandoned the day Rhea got sick. The project was now more than a year overdue. I had never before missed a deadline, so this filled me with anxiety and shame. I really needed to get the book finished so I could honor my contract and restore my relationship with my publisher, but also so I could get paid. Hell, I needed to get the book started because I had yet to write a single page of the thing. But what was that book again that I was meant to be writing? Oh, right. It was supposed to be a glorious, funny, effervescent romp of a novel about a bunch of showgirls in New York City theater world in the 1940s who really loved having sex. Cool, cool, cool. Perfect. Just the thing to write in the devastating aftermath of your partner's death. So I got down to it, and I wrote The City of Girls In the 6 months after Rhea died, I did this by keeping up a blistering pace of productivity, writing harder than I had ever written before. I calculated that I would need to write 3,000 words a day, every day, for several months in order to meet my new extended deadline, so that's exactly what I did. Look, I still don't think it was the worst idea. Creativity has always been my safe and happy space, and it was nourishing to return to the work that I love. It was good to remember who I was, besides a grieving widow. But I pushed myself really, really hard to make that deadline. I drove my exhausted body like a team of sled dogs in order to finish that book, which turned out, ironically enough, to be a tale so joyful that nearly every review of this novel would later use the word sparkling to describe the story. I moved back into the church where I had once lived so briefly, so long ago, and where Rhea had lived for 9 years before she got sick. That's where I hunkered down and worked. I surrounded myself with Rhea's memory and her objects while I wrote. I wore her clothes and ate her food out of the freezer and slept in the bed where she and I had once made love. I talked to her all day and heard her talking to me in return. I felt her presence in the church come and go, just as I had once felt her mother's spirit come and go. It was a very weird summer. Weird in the Shakespearean sense of the word, eerie and haunted. For instance, new neighbors moved in that summer, right next door. They had a bunch of little children and one adorable puppy. When I asked the 6-year-old daughter what the name of her doggie was, she looked at me in the eye and said, Rhea. I almost fell over. I thought I was hallucinating, but her mother confirmed it. Yes, the dog's name was Rhea. No, they did not know that a woman named Rhea had lived next door for many years. Yes, the 6-year-old had named the puppy. Yes, she was aware that it was not a common name. No, the little girl did not know why she had chosen that name. I just like the sound of it, said this tiny, wide-eyed child. All summer long, while I worked on my novel, I heard the children outside playing with their dog, calling her name in their high-pitched voices, Rhea, Rhea, Rhea. Sometimes I would go over there and snuggle the puppy, who was a Rottweiler mix with huge feet and wide shoulders. She was growing up so fast, beautiful and friendly, but also a little dangerous, which made perfect sense. A few months later, the family moved again, taking the dog with them. I never saw canine Rhea again. I wept when they were gone, and the house next door stood empty for a long time after that. The other thing I did during the summer was go for long, searching walks in the woods, which I thought of as dates with Rhea. I would hit the record button on the voice memo app of my phone and leave hour-long messages of me talking to her. I was certain she could hear these messages. I am still certain she could hear them. I walked and talked and cried and laughed. I told Rhea funny stories about our friends and about how crazy everyone was and about how tired and sad I was. I would ask for guidance on how to deal with difficult people. If I got quiet enough, I could hear her answers. Sometimes I would hear her voice in my mind, speaking to me with direct and easy intimacy. Other times she would answer my questions by dropping a memory into my brain, the way our school teachers back in the day used to drop a slide onto an old-fashioned carousel. The image would be a memory of me watching Rhea handle some difficult interpersonal interaction by telling the truth, or setting a boundary, or forgiving someone. You do it this way, she would say. I do not remember praying to God that year, but I sure did pray a lot to Rhea. I was not just sorrowful the first summer after Rhea died, but also, at times, enraged. It was not only anger at Rhea's absence that I was feeling. It was anger at myself for how much of myself I had given away, and anger at what she had left behind for me to clean up. She had assigned me the task of handling the details of her estate, for instance, which did not turn out to be an easy job. Rhea had been both contradictory and grandiose with her friends and loved ones about what her bank account actually contained and how she wished her money and possessions to be distributed. With a furiously clenched jaw, I did my best to clean up the confusion she had left behind and manage everyone's frustration, including my own. The financial gifts that she had promised to her friends I paid from my own account, because her own account was pretty much empty. I paid off her credit card bills too. Although people told me this was a stupid thing to do. Why pay the bills of the dead? What are they going to do? Dock her paycheck? But martyrdom is a central characteristic of codependency, and so of course I paid her bills. Not generously, mind you, but angrily, victimly. Why am I still down here serving you? I remember shouting at Rhea in the woods one day. When you get to float off into heaven and become effing music. Waves of grief and rage overcame me so frequently during that summer that I often felt like I was swimming in wild surf, barely afloat. Sometimes I would have no choice but to stop doing whatever I was doing and tumble to the floor and sob, no longer able to support my own weight. Gigi told me that this was called a bow down moment. She said, you just have to bow down and let it happen. Don't resist. It will only make it worse. Let the emotions roll through you. Just breathe. Eventually it will stop. Those grief waves felt like they would never stop, but it turned out Gigi was correct. Eventually, they always passed. But I could not afford to collapse forever, so after each wave, I would pull myself back up off the floor, wash my face, and start working again, all the while watching warily for the next wave, knowing that I was losing more energy with each one. Can a person survive forever at this pace of weariness and productivity and sorrow? I thought I could survive. I had to survive. It was another day after all, and I still had another 3,000 words to write before the sun went down. Okay, we're going to read this poem called I Will Not Call You, But You Will Come. One day, dear God, after all this madness is over, I will wake up to find you sitting at my breakfast table, dressed in good linen and sensible shoes. You will surprise me with a giant suitcase full of gifts. You will undo all the padlocks and show me pictures of my own innocence. You will teach me the human excellences of inquiry, honesty, and faith. The day will carry on, and still you won't leave. You will tilt my entire house toward freedom. Serenity will be your promise, serenity fulfilled. There will be no charge for anything that happened before I found you, nor dread of what comes next. Until that day comes, though, I will still have my difficulties. Yet sometimes I will feel you bending over me while I sleep. I'm so sorry I was so much trouble, I will say, and you will laugh, the way my mother laughed at me the one time when I was very small and I cut off all my hair. I don't mind a bit of trouble, I will hear you say. I will ask you your name, but not even you will know how to answer that question. But just for the sake of ending all arguments, we will agree to call you Love. All right, let's do one more chapter. I think the other day I read up to like an hour and 16 minutes, so let's do it. This chapter is entitled, Is This What Grieving Looks Like? I took lots of psychedelic drugs during the year after Rhea died, like lots and lots of psychedelic drugs. These substances were amazing because they gave me the chance to see Rhea again in person, not just to hear her voice in my mind or to feel her presence, but to actually see and touch her. Sometimes in these visions she was moonlight, other times she was the moon itself, sometimes she was dancing, vibrating, beautiful neon blue line, which I understood to be what music looks like. Sometimes she was the same white tiger she herself had once glimpsed walking through walls so soon before her death. Sometimes she was purple orbs. Sometimes I could feel her arms around me saying, I've got you. Sometimes on those drugs, I became Rhea. I was able to travel back in time and enter her body and relive the horror of her death. I was able to experience the unspeakable awfulness of what it feels like to be dying in bed while you can hear your friends laughing and talking in the next room, knowing that life and all its pleasures will go on without you. The terror and loneliness were devastating. I wept for Rhea, but I also wept as her. Another time when I was flying on I don't know what that is. Some type of drug. I can't even pronounce it. I got to interview Rhea's cancer cells. I summoned them to me. They arrived in a sheepish, shuffling cluster, and I asked them what it was like to kill her. I wasn't angry, I said. I just wanted to know. They hated their job, they told me, that they hated being cancer cells, but it was their destiny. They explained to me how they lived in Rhea's body since birth, waiting for the signal, instructing them to activate and replicate and commence the process of her death. They had prayed that the signal would never arrive because they had come to love Rhea over the years, the way anyone would love their home. Also, her death, of course, would mean an end to their own lives. Why would they want that? For many years, then, the cancer cluster had lived quietly in her liver, keeping their heads down, trying to go unnoticed, but one morning the signal had come. It's go time. Who sent the signal? I asked. We don't know, the shuffling cluster replied, but we had no choice but to follow the commands we were given. I felt sympathy for the cancer cells. I really did. They seemed like decent enough guys trapped in a literal dead-end job, trapped like all of us in their own karmic predicament. Another night, without a trace of drugs in my system, but lying in bed exhausted and unable to sleep, I suddenly had a vision in which 4 sweet-faced angels dressed in white suits, kind of like the 1980s boy band Nunendo, came to get me and take me on an adventure. It was an astonishingly vivid vision. One moment I was in my bed, wide awake and agitated. The next moment, the Munendo angels were transporting me to an alternate universe. They landed me in a modest, sunny apartment on St. Mark's Place in the East Village. They told me that this was where Rhea and I were currently living together as a married couple, in this apartment that I had never before seen, but which seemed deeply familiar. This was a different universe, I grasped, from what I had always understood to be reality. But it was also happening right now, and every bit as real and as true as the world in which I actually live. In this alternate universe, I immediately comprehended Rhea and I had gotten together as a couple back in the year 2000. Shortly after we met, we had built a life together and it was a good life. Now it was the current day and she was alive and we were happy. I was still a journalist. She was still doing hair. Eat, Pray, Love had never happened. Harley Loco had never happened. We'd been living for 20 years in this bright little rental apartment in a crumbling old brownstone on the south side of the street, right across from Cafe Mogador, where we often went for breakfast. It was a humble existence, but a sweet one. She was sober, I was sober, and it was just as real as the world I had always known to be true. In this vision, I got to talk to Rhea while she washed dishes at the sink, while the 4 white-suited angels at the table watched us and smiled. I knew we were planning to go on a trip because our suitcases were packed by the door, but I didn't know where we were going. But this is real, isn't it? I kept asking the angels. This isn't a dream, and I'm not on drugs, right? This is happening, isn't it? I'm actually right here. The angels beamed at me and nodded. But Rhea, I said to her, you died already. You died on January 4th. I was there. I watched you die. I don't understand what's happening right now. How are you all so here and still alive? Dude, stop asking questions. You'll never be able to get it. But how does all this work, though? I asked the angels. How can I come back here? How many other universes are there? Don't bother trying to explain any of this to her, you guys, Rhea said to the angels, who just shrugged at me with sweet compassion. She'll never be able to understand. And she said to me, you'll never figure this one out, babe. Just hang out and enjoy being with me here in the moment. And then in the very next instant, I was gone, transported back to my bed again, back to this world, alone and bereft. This vision of our home in St. Mark's Place was so tactile and real, right down to the art on the walls and the rugs on the floor, that as soon as I possibly could, I drove to the East Village to see the location in person. Perhaps I hoped that I might encounter Rhea there, that I could walk up the stoop and through the peeling red door and then up the narrow old staircase to the 3rd floor where I knew our apartment was located behind the first door on the left. Perhaps I hoped that I would find her there, alive and well, washing the dishes and packing for a trip. But there was no building on the spot that I had seen in my vision across from Cafe Mogador. There was nothing but an empty lot, the only empty lot on the whole block, in fact. The empty lot gapes like a spot in a mouth where a tooth used to be, and giant graffiti painting of an exploding black crow looks over the vacant spot. When I saw that our home was gone, that our home had never been, I wept and wept right there on the street. Is this what grieving looks like? Was I doing it right? Was I doing it wrong? I don't know. This is what grieving looked like for me. How is Liz doing? Someone asked a family member of mine during this time. Liz is amazing, came the answer. Liz is doing great. What else would they think, given how I was presenting myself? Producing and hustling and putting on a good face and searching for escape, that had been my survival formula since the beginning of forever, and it was keeping me alive right now. Meanwhile, as all this was going on, my unhealed sex and love addiction sat quietly in a dimly lit corner of my mind and did what addiction always does. It waited. Patiently, it watched me spin and toil, and patiently it waited for me to collapse. My addiction watched me overwork. It watched me overperform. It watched me grieve. It watched me drink and take drugs. It watched me demand answers to the workings of the universe. It watched me exhaust myself in service and devotion to someone who wasn't even there anymore. It watched me get knocked down by wave after wave of grief. It watched me cry out in my sleep. As I became more depleted, my addiction grew until it was sleeker and stronger and more powerful than ever. And in the rare moments when I stopped working or when I was too overwhelmed with fatigue to fight it, my addiction started talking to me again. It said the same things it had always said. It said, go out there and find somebody. It said, you deserve some relief. It said, bring me someone. It said, feed me. Eek. Okay, let's read one last chapter because it's only 2 pages. This one is entitled Powerless. I do not have the heart to write out the excruciating details of the binge that I went on less than a year after Rhea died when my addiction instructed me to go out there and find someone. I do not want to put myself through the pain of that time all over again, nor do I wish to breach the privacy of anyone I pulled into my disease with me, nor do I have any desire to drag my readers through even more drama. I can tell you, however, that the tiny part of my brain that could still function with sanity knew that it was unwise for me to get romantically or sexually involved with anyone at that point. First of all, I was sick with grief, and that is no condition in which to engage in romance. Also, I had sworn to myself after Rhea's death that I would spend a considerable amount of time alone, and that I would learn how to stand on my own 2 feet, just as Rhea had instructed. I had never lived on my own for any substantial amount of time, and I knew that I needed it. Building a good and stable and esteem-worthy life for myself was my sincere and earnest plan after Rhea died. But you can't give an addict a plan, because we can't follow a plan, not even our own plans, especially not our own plans. Until the miracle of recovery happens, we addicts only ever have one plan: use. So that's what I did. And how did that work out? Well, I don't even need to find words to describe how my binge ended up, because I already wrote this part 20 years ago in the pages of Eat, Pray, Love. Addiction is the hallmark of every infatuation-based love story. A much younger Liz Gilbert wrote back then, discussing a much earlier doomed relationship. It all begins when the object of your adoration bestows you with a heady hallucinogenic dose of something you had never even dared to admit that you wanted, an emotional speedball, perhaps, of thunderous love and roiling excitement. Soon you start craving that intense attention with the hungry obsession of any junkie. When the drug is withheld, you promptly turn sick, crazy, and depleted, not to mention resentful of the dealer who encouraged this addiction in the first place, but who now refuses to pony up the good stuff anymore, despite the fact that you know he has it hidden somewhere, goddammit, because he used to give it to you for free. Next stage finds you skinny and shaking in the corner, certain only that you would sell your soul or rob your neighbors just to have the thing one more time. Meanwhile, the object of your adoration has become repulsed by you. He looks at you like you're someone he's never met before, much less someone he once loved with high passion. The irony is, you can hardly blame him. I mean, check yourself out. You're a pathetic mess, unrecognizable to your own eyes. You have now reached infatuation's final destination, the complete and merciless devaluation of self. I wrote those words in the early autumn of 2004, but I could just as easily have written them in the early winter of 2018. For that matter, I could just as easily have written those words 30 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 40 years ago, because this sort of behavior is not something that I once did. This sort of behavior is something that I do. Fantasy followed by infatuation, followed by seduction, followed by enmeshment, followed by complete self-abandonment, followed by obsession and desperate need, followed by despair and collapse and loneliness, over and over again. Why do I keep doing it, though? Why do I never seem to graduate from this storyline, no matter how old I get, how intelligent I am, or how hard I try to control myself? I just want to be normal, I remember Rhea saying in tears when she started drinking again after her many years of sobriety. I just want to be a normal person who does normal things that normal people do. Yes, my love, I get it. I very much understand that bewilderment. Why can't we just be normal? The answer to that question, for me at least, was written right there in the pages of Eat, Pray, Love, staring up at me in black and white, rendered blazingly obvious through my use of these unflinching words. Addiction, hallucinogenic, speedball, intense, obsession, drug, sick, crazy, depleted, pathetic, mess, complete and merciless devaluation of self. Here's the thing, though. When I wrote those words over 20 years ago, I thought I was using the language of addiction metaphorically, but it wasn't a metaphor. It was the absolute, bald-faced reality. I was diagnosing myself with perfect accuracy as a sex and love addict without even knowing it. Meaning the reason I can't do normal things that normal people do is because I'm an addict. So there I was, back in the same situation all over again, back on the bathroom floor on my knees all over again, lost all over again. The only difference was that this time I knew, by which I mean to say, thank God I remembered, that there was someplace I could go for help. Oh, go on then. Let's just read one more chapter. Okay. This one is entitled Turning Myself In. People often talk about crawling into the rooms of recovery on their knees, but when I turned to 12-step for the second time, I felt more like I was walking in there with my hands up, like a career criminal turning myself in, ready at last to give up the game. Hi, my name is Lizzie, and I'm a sex and love addict, I said aloud for the first time, and the relief I experienced in uttering those words is beyond my capacity to describe. They call it claiming your seat when you identify yourself as an addict at last and join the community of recovery, and it is indeed a beautiful moment. That moment of surrender, that moment of first belonging. Hi, Lizzie, said all the other love and sex addicts, and I knew I was home. This time, I didn't sit next to the exit or pull a hat down over my head to disguise my identity or run out of the room as soon as the first meeting was over. I listened and took notes just as I had done on my first visit to the rooms, but I also raised my hand to speak, and I told the truth about myself. I also bought the literature, collected some phone numbers for fellowship and outreach, and hung around to speak to some people when the hour-long meeting was over. "I'm so ashamed of all the things I've done," I told one old-timer after the meeting. "Don't worry about it, honey," she said. "Nobody ever soared into this room on the wings of victory. Just keep coming back. Stick with the women in the program and keep away from the men." At least for now. Stay in the middle of the herd and start working the steps, and listen to your higher power's voice when you hear the other people sharing. You'll begin to hear direction for your own life in the stories that other people tell. Keep an open mind. It'll all start to make sense eventually. I came back for another meeting the next day and the day after that, and the following day too, as I listened to the other addicts share their life experiences. I began to hear the story of my own life, told in 100 different voices. I heard from people who'd had some of the same painful childhood experiences as me, which had led them into the same unmanageable behaviors and compulsions. I heard from people who, just like me, had blown up marriage after marriage, their own marriages and the marriages of others. I heard from people who'd lost their jobs, their sanity, or all their money and belongings because of their obsession with some person or another. I took one look at that guy from across the bar and said, "I would follow that man straight to hell," and then I did, said one woman, while the rest of us nodded in quiet understanding. I heard from people who had been living in desperate yearning for decades with partners who were emotionally unavailable, or who had lived their whole lives in degrading servitude to people who did not respect them or love them back, or who were pining in fantasy about relationships that had ended years earlier. I heard from people who had traded sex for love or love for sex or both for money. I heard about insecure attachment style and avoidance and unconscious compliance. I heard about emotional anorexia and cortisol addiction. I'd heard terms I'd never heard before, but that immediately made sense to me because I'd been doing those things for years but didn't know they had names: love bombing, trauma bombing, attention pulling, ecstatic recall, digital stalking, instamacy. I heard about assigning magical qualities to others and making them into your higher power. I heard about mistaking pity, lust, or loneliness for love. I heard about sexualizing our feelings of guilt, shame, fear, rage, and grief. I heard about rape, abuse, pregnancies, venereal disease, pornography, prostitution, suicide, violence. I did not hear a single thing in those meetings that I could not identify with at some level. In fact, to this day, I have still never heard anything in any 12-step meeting that shocks me. Whenever I hear people talking about their most self-destructive behaviors, I'm either like, yeah, I've done that, or yeah, I would probably do that, or yeah, I can see why someone would do that given the chance. I told my own story too, in one 3-minute share at a time. I began sharing things in those meetings that I'd never before told anyone. Things I had buried and denied, secrets I had planned to take to the grave. At first, I found it was frightening to be so vulnerable, especially because I'm a public figure, and I knew there were bound to be some people in the rooms who recognized me. I was chilled by the thought that some of my fellows might run home and tell their friends that they had seen Elizabeth Gilbert in a meeting for sex addicts, and worse, that they might share with others what they had heard me confess. It didn't help that when 2 young women rushed me after a meeting one night to say, "We're your biggest fans. We just had to run over and say hello because we can't believe you're here." This only minutes after I'd shared a story from my life that was so sensitive I'd never even told a therapist about it. I felt horrifically exposed and walked home in tears, feeling awfully sorry for myself because it was clear that I would never be given the gift of anonymity. I might very well have stopped going to the meetings after that, except divine intervention once more saved me. That evening, as I was falling asleep, I heard God say to me, "You've got a choice here, honey. You can either protect your anonymity, or you can get well, but you can't do both. So you need to decide right now what's more important to you, your privacy or your recovery." F my privacy. I needed my recovery. So the next day I was back at the same meeting with those same giddy fangirls in the room, and I told the truth about myself again. It didn't matter what anyone else did with my secrets. I needed a place to share my pain openly and honestly, and I still do. And I have not left the rooms since. And there is a little doodle that says, "There is a season for giving things up. It requires the heart of a lion, though. Are you ready to walk away? Are you ready to finally be finished? Dear God, please save me from my insanity. Thank you." Okay, and then there is a poem. It says, "God works through people. God works through people, I was told when I first entered this program. At first, I didn't understand. Not these people, surely. Not this group of problematic, inconsistent, selfish, boastful, boorish, hopeless, desperate, contradictory, and annoying human beings, each one of them as effed up and flawed as I am. Into this room we all shuffle and file, shaking out our raincoats. Somebody always has a complaint about protocol. Somebody is always deeply offended by the person who has the complaint about protocol. Somebody is always texting or gossiping as the opening prayers begin. The room is always too hot or too cold. There are never enough pamphlets. And a whole bunch of fools and misfits arrive late, scraping their chairs and rustling their plastic bags. But then, just as you start wishing you could be anywhere but here on a Saturday night, the speaker opens her mouth to share her story, and God drops in. Okay, I think we will stop there. Guys, we might finish this book tomorrow. I'm just going to see how much we read today. Okay, we started. Okay, I think we started at running out of road. So we read this much book, and there's this much book left. So I think we're going to finish it tomorrow. I'm really tempted to finish it right now, but I have some stuff to do. I have to mark a bunch of papers. I'm a TA, and I have like 50 papers to mark. But I think tomorrow's the day. And then we're going to move on. I'm so excited to move on. If you find that I'm not criticizing very much, I'm just not finding a whole lot to criticize right now because, I mean, what am I going to criticize? Rhea's death? That would be crazy. And criticizing her, finding her path to her sobriety, that would also, be kind of crazy. But then we're going to start this book. Oh, this is going to save me. I can't wait. I just hope it's a big gossipy, a big gossip fest. And we can, make ourselves a cup of tea and, just listen to everything she has to say. Because there's just so much going on with this right now. And I'm sort of fascinated. It's just been so much drama. I was thinking, now other people on YouTube have read Entitled cover to cover, but we haven't. So I would like to know if you've stayed this long. Okay, if there are books that other people have read, would you still be interested if we read it together? Or would you rather just go and see someone else read it? You tell me. Because to me, I'm like, well, we have our little group. We can read books together, even if, it's not like we can't read a book here that someone else has covered because we have our takes on it and we have our comments, right? And our thoughts. So anyway, let me know. But guys, tomorrow is going to be our last day. I really do think. So that means that what's today? Wednesday? So tomorrow's Thursday. So that means on Friday we're going to start our new book. I'm so excited because, guys, we need a break. And I'm sure this is going to, I don't know how dark it's going to get, but I'm hoping that it's going to be a nice little break. Okay, thank you so much for being here with me. I hope you have a fabulous rest of your evening, and I will see you tomorrow. Remember to take care of yourselves. Drink your water. Take a nap if you need one. Try to get some sunlight. Take your vitamin D because with the light changing, you're going to get depleted, as I am depleted. Yes, take care of yourself. Get as much rest as you can. All the good things. Okay, see you tomorrow. Bye.